Hello, I'm Simon Whistler. You're watching Top 10's Net, and in the video today we're looking at the top 10 infamous Roman emperors and empresses. Just before we get started, I will say that this video is made in collaboration with Dr. Matthew Zarzekny of historyandheadlines.com. If you want more lists like this, do head over to historyandheadlines.com. Number 10. Domitian. From the 24th of October 51 to the 18th of September 96. Domitian was the final emperor of the Flavian dynasty. Before his demise, he reigned for a fairly long time, from 81 to 96. During that time, Rome fought a number of fierce yet defensive wars against the Chatti, the Britons, and the Dacians. He also deified members of his family and was the first emperor to demand his subjects address him as Lord and God. Due to his polytheistic religious policies and emphasis on the imperial cut, it is alleged that Domitian engaged in substantial persecutions of Jews and Christians. In 89, a major revolt of a Roman governor occurred. Domitian suffered that challenge to his reign, but he did not survive the assassination of 96. His assassin stabbed Domitian in the groin with a dagger, wrestled with the emperor, and then joined with other conspirators in dealing 6 more stab wounds to finish the emperor off. Number 9. Irene of Athens, circa 752 to the 9th of August 803. Irene is the first of the East Roman or Byzantine imperials to appear on this video. She is also the last to have any realistic chance of a tie to Rome. She reigned as empress consort from 775 to 780, and then as empress in her own right from 797 to 802. You can count on one hand the number of women to rule by themselves in Roman and Byzantine history. As such, that alone is quite a claim to fame. On at least 3 occasions, she called herself emperor rather than empress. What makes her so infamous are 2 things. First, she did something quite unexpected from a mother. She usurped power from her son, and to do so had him blinded and imprisoned. If mutilating her own son wasn't bad enough, the second infamous event for her reign was not only her failure to maintain her authority, but also to reunify the Roman Empire. On 2 occasions, she apparently entered into negotiations to forge a marriage alliance with Charlemagne. First, while he was the king of the Franks, and the two considered having their 2 children marry each other. Well, you already heard about what she did with her son. Next, she apparently entertained the possibility of marrying Charlemagne after he became Holy Roman Emperor. Had she managed to retain her position and pull of such a marriage, the consequences for subsequent medieval history would have been considerable. Instead, she was deposed and exiled to Lesbos, and the 2 halves of the remnants of the Roman Empire continued along their separate paths. Number 8. Justinian I the Great, from 482 to the 14th of November 565, and Theodora I, from around 500 to the 28th of June 548. As co-rulers, Justinian and Theodora can arguably count as one reign in which many of their more questionable actions, if true, were joint crimes against humanity. In any event, this imperial couple is something of a paradox because they are both simultaneously revered and reviled. On the one hand, they are remembered for the beautiful Hagia Sophia Basilica built during their reign, the body of civil law codified under their reign, and the reconquest of the former Roman territories along the Mediterranean, from the Vandals to the Goths. For these and other achievements, both Justinian and Theodora are considered saints among the Orthodox Christians. Yet their reign also experienced major catastrophes, from the Nika riots that almost overthrew Justinian had Theodora not emboldened him to stand firm and massacre his critics, to the even more significant plague of Justinian that resulted in millions of deaths. Moreover, the most famous primary source account of their reign is hardly complimentary. Procopius's secret history depicts the couple as monsters, literally. Justinian, for example, allegedly had the ability to make his head vanish. As for Theodora, Procopius claims that when someone offended her by insulting a fellow female, she had the man bent over before she spanked him like a schoolboy. While some of these anecdotes may have been the inventions of the medieval author, they nevertheless have added to the infamous memory of Justinian and his wife as a man and woman honored for many long-lasting accomplishments that occurred amidst a reign of cataclysmic disasters. Number 7. Julia Agrippina the Younger, from the 7th of November 15 or the 6th of November 16 to the 19th or the 23rd of March 59. Agrippina was the last wife of Emperor Claudius, from the 1st of August 10 BC to the 13th of October 54 AD, but she is the first to appear on this list. She does not have the same place in popular culture as his earlier wife, Valeria Messalina, but she is infamous all the same. Whereas Claudius had his previous wife executed, Agrippina did the opposite, allegedly murdering her husband via poisonous mushrooms. Yet, despite that criminal act, she became a priestess success of his cult. Yes, Claudius was deified, and then she engaged in a power struggle with her son and Claudius's successor, Nero, from the 7th of November 15 or the 6th of November 16th to the 19th or the 23rd of March 59. Early in Nero's reign, mother and son conspired against Nero's half-brother, Tiberius Claudius Caesar Britannicus, ultimately murdering him. Yet mother and son did not stay unified. They quarreled to such a degree that Nero plotted to kill her. He first tried to sink her boat, but she survived and swam to safety. He next tried a more direct approach by sending 1 to 3 men to assassinate her. Her alleged last words were for the assassin to strike at her womb, i.e. the body part that had produced such a monster. Number 6. Elagabalus, from around 203 to the 11th of March 222. The allegations against Elagabalus mostly come from the Augustan history, a source of questionable reliability. Nevertheless, this youthful emperor has had the dubious distinction of having much of his life remembered for personality quirks that may or may not be true. If true, then they present a deeply disturbed individual not really capable of ruling a vast empire. In terms of religious missteps, he offended traditional Romans by focusing worship on Elagabal rather than Jupiter, and married a priestess known as a Vestal Virgin to have godlike children. Indeed, his real and alleged sexual missteps are numerous. In addition to the Vestal Virgin, he married and divorced 4 other women. He allegedly referred to a male slave as his husband while referring to himself as the slave's queen, and prostituted himself to others. Elagabalus even offered a good deal of money to anyone who could in effect perform a sex change operation on him, if the ancient sources are to be believed. Thus, after a relatively short reign, both he and his mother were killed together, decapitated, and disposed of. Yet his infamous memory continued in numerous works of literature, paintings, comics, music, dance, television, and plays. A Spanish word, Heliogabalo, was coined after him, which refers to persons overwhelmed by gluttony. Even Napoleon described Alexander the Great as commencing his career with the mind of a Trajan, but he closed it with the heart of Nero and the manners of Elagabalus. As such, whether the details of his maligned life are true or not, Elagabalus has been remembered as one of the worst examples of a Roman ruler in his own time, in Napoleon's time, and even for many in the 21st century as well. Number 5. Tiberius, the 16th of November 42 BC to the 16th of March 37 AD. Tiberius is mostly negatively remembered for the numerous despicable acts recounted by Gaius Suetonius Tranquillus from 69 to 122, some of which were recreated in disturbing manner for the opening portion of the film Caligula from 1979. This portion of the movie concerns the bizarre debauchery of Tiberius while on Capri, in which he engaged in such lewd behavior as swimming with young minnows, actually children, who would suck at certain parts of his body. Not in the movie, but in the primary source, are a host of other bizarre anecdotes, such as Tiberius beating a man's face with a fish after hearing about the man bragging for having caught it. Tiberius allegedly then beat the man's face with a crustacean after the man joked that it was good he had not been bragging about the crustacean he caught as well. Yet even before these incidents, Tiberius had a strange life and at times a frightening reign. Before he became emperor, his second wife was exiled for engaging in a scandalous affair. It is also during Tiberius's reign that Jesus was most likely crucified. Number 4. Commodus, from the 31st of August 161 AD to the 31st of December 192 AD. Commodus serves as the main villain of 2 major motion pictures, The Fall of the Roman Empire and the Academy Award winner for Best Picture, Gladiator. As such, he is one of the more well-known emperors in popular culture. His real-life death did not occur in the arena during combat against a gladiator named Maximus, but rather in a bath via strangulation from a wrestler named Narcissus. What was the cause of the conspiracy to kill him? Well, among other things, his foreign policy was questionable. He abandoned his father's efforts to add Marcomannia and Sarmatia as provinces to the Roman Empire. Had Commodus somehow consolidated and Romanized these areas, it could have arguably made the empire stronger for the eventual Germanic invasions later in the empire's history. His personal relations were not exactly praiseworthy either. Under his reign, he had his wife exiled and his sister, along with her daughter, executed. His policy seemed consistent with a cult of personality in which he competed as a gladiator, including killing elephants and even a giraffe. He gave himself all sorts of lofty titles, such as Pacifier of the World, and went so far as to rename both a month and the city of Rome after himself. It should hardly be surprising that eventually his people would have had enough. Unfortunately for them, his murder only resulted in a series of civil wars known as the Year of the Five Emperors, which was ultimately won by a man named Septimius Severus, the 1st of April 145 to the 4th of April 211. Number 3. Valeria Messalina, from around 17 or 20 to 48 AD. The wife of the more respected Emperor Claudius, from the 1st of August 10 BC to the 13th of October 54 AD, is by far the most infamous empress in Rome's history and is one of the few empresses to ever be the subject of a titular film, Messalina Messalina. Penthouse pet Annika de Lorenzio, from 1952 to 2011, portrayed the doomed empress in both Caligula from 1979 and its sequel Messalina Messalina. Messalina is most known for her extreme and shameful sexuality. She was not restrained in the ways of a model Roman imperial lady, such as Augustus's wife Livia. Instead, she embarrassed her husband by engaging in various unprecedented promiscuous acts. Most notorious is the incident later reproduced in a scene for the I, Claudius series, in which she competed against and defeated a prostitute in a contest to see who could have the most sexual partners in a 24-hour period. Reportedly, Messalina had 25. After an affair with a senator, her days were numbered and she was killed via beheading. Number 2. Nero. From the 15th of December 37 to the 9th of June 68. Nero is one of 3 Caesars featured in an episode of Ancients Behaving Badly. The other is number 1 on this list, as well as Julius Caesar. However, historians do not agree on whether or not Julius Caesar should be counted as the first emperor, so I've excluded him from this list. Instead, we have the notorious Nero. As with many individuals on this list, the extent of his actual acts of depravity is disputed by modern historians. For example, he almost surely did not fiddle while Rome burned, yet he persists in having an infamous legacy. He is blamed for killing his mother, kicking his wife to death, and later cowardly committing suicide to avoid being barbarically tortured by angry Romans. He is accused of persecuting Christians and Jews to such an extent that some even denounce him as an antichrist. The religious animosity to Nero has persisted long after his death. Famed German exorcist victim Anneliese Michel of Germany even claimed that Nero was one of the demons who possessed her. Yet, if there is one final claim to shame for Nero, it's that he was the last of the Julian-Claudian dynasty to rule Rome, his reign plunging Rome into a civil war known as the Year of the Four Emperors. Yes, it wasn't quite as bad as the one that followed Commodus. Number 1. Caligula. From the 21st of August 12 AD to the 24th of January 41 AD. You didn't seriously think it'd be anyone else at the top of this list, did you? Caligula is hands down the most infamous Roman ruler. He is depicted as a monster in the film starring Malcolm McDowell as the Mad Emperor. Caligula appears in an Adult Swim web game as a destructive force and is the focus of such televised documentaries such as Ancients Behaving Badly and a standalone documentary called Caligula: Reign of Madness. His bizarre antics range from lavishing his horse with human-like honors and suspected incest with his sisters, one of whom he deified as a goddess. His people so hated him that not only did they stab him multiple times in a manner reminiscent of the death of Julius Caesar, the murderers also bashed his young daughter's head against a wall. Now, again, whether or not he actually did some of the more heinous crimes alleged against him is questionable. They say that history is written by the victors after all, but regardless of the veracity of the allegations against him, he has gone down as one of the most despised rulers in history, and that's not just of Rome, but everywhere. Just as one final comment, a group of filmmakers even put together a spoof trailer starring mainstream celebrities for a not-safe-for-work fake trailer of a never-actually-made remake of the 1979 movie. This fake trailer, which has Tiberius and Messalina in it as well, thereby shows the ongoing interest in remembering this particular man as something more akin to a mythological monster than a real person. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Also, over there on the right are a couple of other of our videos that you might enjoy if you enjoyed this one, and thank you for watching.